what we want to try to do with this session is give a broad understanding of community-engaged research methods. We are aiming to provide a kind of an overview of a range of research methods and assess their potential role in your research projects. To examine some of the expectations around community-engaged research, community-engaged research-based project, including the messiness of that work, and how to think about that messiness in a productive rather than a debilitating way. As you'll see today when I talk about research methods, my background in community-engaged research is largely in relationship to working with young people. I'm going to talk about a couple of projects. One project done with Langara college students in 2018, 2019. And a number of other projects. I'm a professor in communication, and I've long been involved in a variety of community engagement projects, including the Media Democracy Project at SFU. I have a tremendous interest in nonprofit communities and organizations and how they affect urban infrastructures, particularly for young people. When we turn our attention to CERi methods and a kind of archive we might think of CERi methods, I think there are disciplinary questions to be thought about in this context, and ways of and absolutely ways of thinking about one's research community, the community one's working with, the needs that are part of the project, and ways of expressing those needs, modalities, in other words, I would want to say. I think the modalities that one, modality of research methods or techniques that one chooses has a lot to do with who one is working with and the kinds of aims that are coming out of that project. So in the next 15 minutes, I guess, I'm going to spend some time talking about a sampling of community-engaged research methods. I'd like to highlight some projects as part of that, just to give you an indication of where these research methods go. And I will be able to come back to some of these at the end. I'm hoping that some of them might resonate with you and offer directions on how your projects might in fact move forward. That's for a much bigger conversation, but at least to get that started today would be fruitful, I think. So in thinking about community-engaged research methods, something that has been said already this morning and comes out of the first workshop is, I think we're all aware that now that community-engaged research is best understood as a framework, as a way of doing work together. And that it is certainly informed by epistemological questions about how we define knowledge. It's defined by ontological issues about where knowledge exists and who holds it. Nonetheless, when we think about designing community-engaged research projects, I think what we're working with are choices within a framework of expectations about what community-engaged research looks like. Ethics, as was introduced in Kari and Tara's workshop, ethical questions, questions of reciprocal connection between researchers and communities are profoundly important. Participation is profoundly important. I think it's worth remembering, though, that participation doesn't necessarily mean reciprocal relationships, because sometimes community-engaged research can require participation of community as a way of extracting that data, as a way of extracting data. And I think community-engaged research raises a further question that looks at how that participation unfolds, and how that, the how question will impact the staging of research, the exchange of knowledge around research methods, and the results and outcomes of that research. Some of those techniques that they are, that I think, well known and have a really solid track record in the field include arts-based methods. And I'm going to break these down a little bit clearer as we move along. Arts-based methods, social audits, citizen science, which I think has had a strong effect in particular disciplines. I'm thinking of resource management, for instance, as one area where citizen science certainly has come up and been used. Participatory mapping and evaluating. And I want to mention this in relationship to Amen's work with to your work, Keisha, on nature-based solutions. I think participatory mapping and evaluation have been understood as ways to engage community members in evaluating, acting on, changing social infrastructures. And then oral history. And I'd like to mention one project at the end about oral history that I've been involved with. Oops. So if we think of arts-based methods, we could break those down into at least 6 different kinds. And each of these methods, techniques could themselves be a workshop, if not more. So please excuse the very brief way that I'm kind of sampling these practices. But I wanted to highlight some examples of arts-based methods, including digital storytelling. Digital storytelling, as you may know, is a way of allowing communities and members of communities to come together using photography, using digital storytelling or digital video, and when I think of digital storytelling as opposed to participatory video, I think of digital storytelling as really being focused on the speaker and the storyteller about their experience. Participatory video doesn't tend to be limited by the speaker in the same way and may include more of the environment and the context and be more filmic in a sense. I wanted to highlight one project I've been involved with, which is using digital storytelling. One of my doctoral students, Noelle Mueller-Myrdahl, who just completed her doctorate in communication, did a fantastic dissertation project called Willing the Impossible, reconciling the Holocaust and the Nakba through photography-based storytelling. And what Noelle did was she worked with members of the local Palestinian and Israeli Jewish community in Vancouver to talk about their people's memories of the Holocaust and the Nakba and the way in which it oriented their understanding of the crisis in the Middle East, and the way in which a sharing of photographs and storying about photographs produced a new context from which members of the Palestinian and Israeli communities in Vancouver could understand the differences in histories and the tensions around those histories as a way of trying to reconcile the vast silences that exist across communities. And it was actually in the sharing of work, both the photos and the stories, and seeing others from across communities talk about highly contentious images, that a remarkable space of opening to will a collaboration together across tremendous difference and antagonism took shape. Noelle's work ended up producing a digital archive of those stories that could then be shared further afield beyond the participants in the research project. And it's an example of the way knowledge formations and knowledge mobilization using digital storytelling can provide a space of understanding and an archive of understanding that could be shared into the future. Other arts-based methods include, I mentioned participatory video, also the use of drawing, collage, and painting as a way of expressing one's understanding of a particular issue that may not be available through the written word. So Creative Publics in short form was a project designed to engage those who are not involved in voting or election activity in the 2015 federal election campaign. You may remember that that was the first election Trudeau won. Trudeau won against Stephen Harper. And what was fascinating about Creative Publics is the way in which it used drawing and collage as a mechanism for non-engaged publics, non-engaged members of the community to express the issues, the concerns, the relationships that are front and center for them around the election. It allowed a sense of involvement and a public atmosphere of engagement that for the participants in the project didn't exist. Creative Publics is a project around how we think of the production of data, the production of knowledge, and the production of community through research using drawing and collage. Theater is another arts-based method in community-engaged research that's long been used to draw communities together. I want to mention a project last year in 2018. I was involved in a project that looked at how young people 18 to 22 imagine the role of online pornography in their sexual lives. And the Porn Project and Incognito Mode were two theatrical productions that were developed from the experiences and words of young people themselves at Langara College in the Studio 58 program, working in collaboration with the theater and research team to look at the role of pornography in young people's lives, its meanings, its effects on power relationships, so on and so forth. Two productions came out, which included the words, the scenes, the experiences of young people themselves, defining a kind of porn literacy. And it really captures, as many projects have, the way in which theater can ferment a space of public understanding and, in fact, policy development, where porn literacy workshops are concerned. I'll run really quickly through other methods. Creative writing and music have been used. Social audits. Social audits are really forms of holding, working with communities to hold authorities to account, to find mechanisms through either citizen report cards, public expenditure tracking, sector-specific budget monitoring that involve communities around assessing how they're being served, how they're being ignored, what kind of resources are or are not being allocated and distributed in their, to their betterment. I think, for instance, in the case of Amen's project, that this might be an interesting thing to consider as part of the work that you're doing. Likewise with Keisha. Okay, I'll go on and move citizen science. Citizen science obviously has disciplinary background, but there are a number of techniques in citizen science, including environmental monitoring, working with communities to code data, which allows that data as so-called raw material to open up in a much richer way. And the use of participatory geographical information systems, which is a fascinating way in which GPS data can be used as a way of monitoring community service and community resourcing. The last area, or two last areas I want to point to, are participatory mapping and evaluation, including using community engaged research to measure things like the most significant change or the well-being of a community, etc. These are all different directions in which different routes, if you like, that participatory evaluation can be taken up. There's lots to be said about each. I want to wrap up because I realize we're coming to the end of this. Oral history and oral storytelling are long and I think old methods, not old, but compelling methods within community engaged research that has drawn on the ability of community members to tell, to exchange story about their experiences and histories that otherwise goes unrecognized and unacknowledged. Just mention one project. I've been working over the last 5 years on a project looking at the history of youth art communities in major cities around the world. One of the ways in which that project is unfolded is by working with pioneers, that is, people in each of those cities who have been involved in youth arts, often driven and led by women, often led by women who have had precarious relationships with ongoing full-time employment, because youth arts is often filled with contract positions. So capturing a sense of the formative figures in cities that have shaped this world but are often unacknowledged in that contribution through oral history and oral storytelling has been a really formative part of that project. It puts voice and local histories into a global context and gives them a kind of resonance that can be incredibly powerful, not only for the project, but for the sense of community itself and how the community sees and hears itself.